way to my Father, but I will return.
In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, I bear witness that there is no God but Allah, and I bear witness that Muhammad is his messenger. I further bear witness that Allah came in the person of Master Father Muhammad, and that he raised up among us the Honorable Elijah Muhammad as his second self, and has placed him on the throne of power over the universe. And I further bear witness that the Honorable Louis Farrakhan is his Christ, the Lamb of God, the Son of Man, through whom Allah is establishing his eternal kingdom. Assalamu alaikum. I am Karriem Allah, and thank you for taking time to view this very important message. We will begin with these verses from the Holy Quran. And as it says, the Jews, I replace it with the Synagogue of Satan. And the Synagogue of Satan planned, and Allah also planned, and Allah is the best of planners. When Allah said, O Jesus, I will cause thee to die, and exalt thee in my presence, and clear thee of those who disbelieve, and make those who follow thee above those who disbelieve, to the day of resurrection. Then to me is your return, so I shall decide between you concerning that wherein you differ. Well, the Jesus whom Allah is addressing is the Messiah, and not the prophet Jesus who lived 2,000 years ago. We will explain a little bit more about this later on in the message. But as such, this prophecy points to the looming betrayal and crucifixion of the Messiah, the Honorable Louis Farrakhan. Now, in this message, our aim is to parse these verses in order to set expectations for what is now occurring and how it will intensify as we move towards the fulfillment of this specific prophecy, which again includes the Messiah's imminent departure from among the people. In the previous message, we covered aspects of the Honorable Louis Farrakhan's communion with the Honorable Elijah Muhammad on the Great Mother Plain on September 17, 1985. He was instructed by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad to make known to the public through a press conference held in Washington, D.C., to make the plans of President Reagan and his Joint Chiefs of Staff known that they were planning a war. Now, why was the Honorable Louis Farrakhan instructed to do this, to make their plans known? Well, there's no way to effectively attempt to interfere with someone's plans unless you are aware of that plan and also aware that such a plan is in the works. Even though through our best efforts, we may not be able to stop the execution of that plan, we can have some say about how we respond to it, since we are now knowledgeable of it. This is how we can circumvent or alleviate the most horrific messianic prophecies described in the Bible and in the Holy Quran, particularly the War of Armageddon that is described in the 16th chapter of the book of Revelation, and also the 9th chapter of the book of Daniel, speaking of the War of Desolation. Now, if we dare to open our eyes and face the truth, we can see how tensions are escalating among nations as a precursor for this great war. You just have to check some other news sources. Your main news sources keep that out from the public's eye. But there's a lot brewing, and there's a lot going on now in terms of military movement, particularly over in Asia. So again, we cannot control the Synagogue of Satan's movement towards vilifying the Honorable Louis Farrakhan's integrity in domestic life. but we can control how we respond to their wickedness since we now know about it. Now, the most important question is, how should we respond? What should our response be? In the Synagogue of Satan's epic attack on the Honorable Louis Farrakhan, should our response be based on our personal opinions, assumptions, and for many, even ignorance? Well, we learn through the Holy Quran that this approach is what got the believers in trouble with Allah. And it states in the Quran regarding this, surely they who concocted the lie are a party from among you, believers. Why did not the believing men and the believing women, when you heard it, think well of their own people and say, this is an evident falsehood? Why did they not bring forth witnesses of it? So as they have not brought forth witnesses, they are liars in the sight of Allah. So here Allah questions the obedience of those who claim to believe in Him and in His Messiah. Now they either ignored or did not know the divine directives in the Holy Quran regarding how accusations are to be handled. Now this may seem hard to believe, but there are some of those who claim to be Muslims that absolutely do not read the Holy Quran. And the same is true for those who consider themselves or claim to be Jews or Christians. They don't read the Bible, some of those. So these persons are prone to rely on their own opinions when commenting on matters of dire importance. Now in the Holy Quran, Allah states, He it is who has sent to thee the book. In it are verses basic or fundamental, meaning of established meaning. They are the foundation of the book. So the Holy Quran and the Bible contain guidance, rules, laws, and divine directives that ensure proper human relations and relationships. Obedience to these divine ordinances produce peace and civility in our homes, societies, and nations. So if you claim to believe in any of these books, what is the condition of our homes and neighborhoods and nations? Could it just be that there's gross disobedience to the divine mandates in both of these books? Well, Allah has established rules for how we, meaning every human being on the planet, is to handle allegations made against others, whether the person who is the target of these allegations is present or not, meaning including those who have already died. So you don't get away with allegations aimed at someone who's passed on. They still have to be handled properly. But in this satanic world, so-called biopics and docudramas about historical figures usually contain slander against them, which is meant to ruin their reputation and denigrate any good they have done. And Hollywood has a field day making movies about people who have long passed on. There's much to say about that, but some of you actors, you just are pathetic. You take these roles playing these people, and you don't even know if they even did the role or the thing that you're acting out. All for just a damn paycheck. But God is going to disgrace your raggedy behind. And you're facing that right now. Well, on this point, we must keep in mind that the Synagogue of Satan, according to the Prophecies, spews its flood of slander on the heels of the Messiah's departure to the Father. This means that the lion's share of this epic attack occurs when the Messiah, the Honorable Louis Farrakhan, is no longer seen or present. This prophecy is described in the book of Revelation, and for the sake of preparation, being prepared for this attack, let us revisit this prophecy. Now, in this prophecy, the woman here is symbolic to the Messiah, and it states from the Bible. And when the dragon saw that he was cast unto the earth, he persecuted the woman which brought forth the man child. And to the woman were given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place, where she is nourished for a time, and times and half a time from the face of the serpent. And the serpent cast out his mouth water as a flood after the woman, that he might cause her to be carried away of the flood. Now, there's much into that. We can see it's clear symbolism, because she's already taken off on 2 wings of an eagle. So how can floods possibly become airborne? But we're going to parse these verses as well. So it is the Messiah's exposing of the satanic families of the Synagogue of Satan that slings these demonic families to the earth for all to see, to realize where the problem is. And the mass news media and the media outlets of film and television, they're part of it, because they're owned by the Synagogue of Satan, who's masquerading as Jews. That's just one area. But if you look at the arms industry, the educational system, it's all part of that too. Even agriculture and the food industry, all satanic and polluted. Well, in response to the Messiah's revealing the man of sin, human beings, the Synagogue of Satan persecutes the Messiah, producing the hostile environment for his departure or flight to the Father. After that, his enemies unleash a flood of slander against him. Let me say that again. After that, his flight, his enemies release the flood of slander against him. Now, although persecution is facilitated through slander, the most potent slander will not come until certain people are no longer among us, namely the Messiah, the Honorable Louis Farrakhan, and those most qualified to thwart the slander against him, because they are also victims of that slander. So when you attack the Honorable Louis Farrakhan's domestic life, or you try to sully his integrity, you have to do it with those who are going to be involved with that in order for you to be successful. But if these persons are no longer alive, then they're not here to defend your slander against their associate, against the minister, against their relative, whoever. But in this case, we're talking about the Messiah. Now, on this note, I'm going to say, some of you all who are very young, I'm 41 years into the Nation of Islam as a registered member, going back to 1980. And of course, we just heard recently the Honorable Louis Farrakhan said his start was in 1981, when he announced that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad was alive at the first Savior's Day during the rebuilding. But of course, he began to go across the country rebuilding the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad as early as September 17th or September 1977, excuse me. So there's a lot that we don't know, that many of you don't know, of the early times along the Messiah's journey in fulfillment of the Messianic prophecies. Well, Satan is going to strike that area if he's to be successful with slander. Just giving you a heads up. Because some of you think you know and you don't know. You're in your 20s, maybe early 30s, and you think you know some things. There's a lot of things you don't know. But we're going to talk about that point in a minute. Now, back to the Synagogue of Satan and how they do what they do, their modus operandi. So the passing away or death of these persons who were along with the Messiah's journey early on gives the Synagogue of Satan the leeway to rewrite history, because these persons are no longer alive to be consulted about the lies attached to their names. So they cannot defend themselves, obviously, because they're not here. But notwithstanding, they can be defended through the correct interpretation of the messianic prophecies. Because if you're walking with the Messiah, you're part of the prophecies that he must fulfill. So they had a role in fulfilling some aspects of the messianic prophecies along with the Messiah, whether they be relatives of his, believers, or associates. And this Messiah we're talking about is the Honorable Louis Farrakhan. So the false witnesses and the so-called experts on the Nation of Islam are eagerly waiting for the Honorable Louis Farrakhan to not be in a position to defend himself against the slander that is hurled against him with great velocity. I don't know if any of you have played baseball. Early in my life, I did play in a league. And when you're standing up for bat and you see that fastball come, you can be amazed at the velocity that thing is moving. They clock some of them fastballs, 90 miles an hour and more. Well, that's what's coming in their attack against the Honorable Louis Farrakhan. Their aim is to treat the Nation of Islam as a thing that can be examined, analyzed, and explained from an academic, social, or religious perspective. That's part of the modus operandi. Let's create it, let's make it a thing. Then we can become experts on the thing. Well, what is the Nation of Islam? You can't make it up. You can't make up what it is. You can try, but we already know what it is. Is it a thing? Furthermore, can the perceived organization of men and women, believers, registered Muslims, striving to support the Messiah in his mission, be considered the Nation of Islam in its real and full manifestation? Absolutely not. According to Master Fard Muhammad, the finder and redeemer of Abraham's lost people, the black people of the Western Hemisphere, the Nation of Islam is beyond the comprehension, well beyond the comprehension of Yaqub's grafted devils, the Caucasian people, even those with so-called academic degrees from universities. In the supreme wisdom in the lesson called the student enrollment, that anyone aspiring to become a registered Muslim must recite in order to be on a roll as one. The question is asked in that lesson, what is the birth record of the said Nation of Islam? And the answer is the said Nation of Islam has no birth record. It has no beginning nor ending. In other words, it's eternal. So first, the phrase the said Nation of Islam is used because Master Fard Muhammad and the Honorable Elijah Muhammad also used terms such as the Black Nation and the original nation in exchange for the Nation of Islam. So these terms all mean the same: Nation of Islam, original nation, Black nation, original people. We are further taught by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad that the original people's histories go back beyond 76 trillion years. And that for the last 66 trillion years, the holy wise scientists of the original people we have written our histories in 25,000 year cycles of time. Now I know what the Caucasian people say, the earth is only 1 billion and something years old. They wouldn't even know, and the Holy Quran even tells us don't even listen to them because they don't even know their own beginning. But we know it. You were grafted from Yaqub's. You were grafted from the original people through the effort of Yaqub. Why don't you teach that? So how can so-called academic experts from the meager world of Yaqub's grafted devils be experts on the eternal nation of Islam, the black nation, the original people? They can't and they are not. So the gist of the research in literature from these half-learned demons with academic degrees who consider themselves experts on the nation of Islam is really confined to documenting the Messiah's journey in his mission to reform a spiritually and morally dead people, made that way through 400 years under a beast-like people whom these so-called experts represent. And all the while, the Messiah has contended, the Honorable Louis Farrakhan, with the constant annoyances of the Synagogue of Satan in its devilish people who are absolute rebels against Allah and all things righteous. So they have no credibility except in the minds of dumb Negroes and people that think like them. Therefore, any so-called drama these so-called experts document, highlight, and publish regarding the work of the Messiah among his people arises from the Messiah's fulfillment of the prophecy of his mission. But you can leave that one out, right? What is the mission of the Messiah, Mr. So-called academic cracker expert? You can leave that out conveniently to make yourself look like you know something. And the dumb Negroes who follow you don't mean a hill of beans in the sight of God and the truth. So if you got them clapping for you, that's all you got. Well, the Messiah's mission is described in the book of Ezekiel of the Bible, and it states of him, "And he," meaning Almighty God, "said unto me, Son of man, stand upon thy feet. I will speak unto thee. And the Spirit entered into me when he spake unto me, and sat upon my feet, that I heard him that spake unto me. And he said unto me, Son of man, I send thee to the children of Israel, to a rebellious nation that hath rebelled against me. They and their fathers have transgressed against me, even unto this very day. For they are impudent children and stiff-hearted. I do send thee unto them, and thou shalt say unto them, Thus saith the Lord." Now those who come to believe in the Messiah and become registered Muslims are also of the people of the children of Israel, a rebellious house or nation of stiff-hearted people. So the Messiah experiences difficulties in his effort to reform his people out of ignorance, mental death, and self-hatred. These difficulties are described in many of the biblical and Quranic narratives of the prophets that the Messiah fulfills as he journeys through his mission. So if you want to find drama that you want to document of the Honorable Louis Farrakhan's journey among us, you can consult these books. So the Synagogue of Satan's so-called experts on the nation of Islam are waiting to be called into action to dominate the mass news media with their lies, slander, and gossip. Yes, they are. Now, in the Holy Quran, Allah states to the Messiah, "Therefore proclaim thou again the Messiah, the praises of thy Lord. For by the grace of thy Lord thou art no vulgar soothsayer, nor art thou one possessed. Or do they say, his enemies, a poet, we await for him some calamity hatched by time. Say thou, Allah's telling the Messiah to say, await ye, I too will wait along with you. Well, what is this calamity that the Synagogue of Satan hopes engulfs the Messiah, the Honorable Louis Farrakhan? Is this calamity the news that he has died? Is it the report that they have finally managed to kill him? Well, the Holy Quran gives us an indication of the controversy surrounding the Messiah's departure to the Father and what ensues after his departure from among us. The Bible also gives that. But it states in the Holy Quran, and when Allah will say, O Jesus, son of Mary, didst thou say to men, take me and my mother for two gods besides Allah? He will say, glory be to thee. It was not for me to say what I had no right to say. If I had said it, thou wouldst indeed have known it. Thou knowest what is in my mind, and I know not what is in thy mind. Surely thou art the great knower of the unseen. I said, Jesus speaking, I said to them, naught save as thou didst command me. And that is, serve Allah, my Lord and your Lord. And I was a witness of them so long as I was among them. But when thou didst cause me to die, thou wast the watcher over them, and thou art witness of all things. Now in verse 16, this is a prophecy. Allah is speaking with Jesus, in this case the Messiah, about circumstances taking place among the people whom Jesus is now no longer among. He's with the Father. So this indicates that after the Messiah's departure, his words and mission are to be intentionally, or expected to be intentionally, misrepresented by his enemies, including the hypocrites. Now, of course, Allah knows what Jesus taught, as Jesus indicated. You know what is in my mind, but I don't know what's in yours. But the question that Allah asks alludes to the great controversy produced by the slanders after the Messiah's departure from among the people. Now, in verse 17, Jesus reaffirms that this gross misrepresentation of his teachings and mission did not occur while he was among the people, but after Allah took him from among them. So many hypocrites, agents of the synagogue of Satan, and disbelievers are eagerly waiting on the Honorable Louis Farrakhan's departure so that they can misrepresent the circumstances of his departure first, and also discredit his teachings and mission through slander, mainly against his domestic life. I know you're waiting in the wings with your arsenal of slander so you can jump on the people with your barrage of lies. But of course you won't say it while he's present, while he can defend himself. And this is what these verses or prophecy point to. Jesus said, well, look, you can confirm when I was with them, I taught them that. Nobody said a damn thing when I was here teaching them of my representation of your word. But when you brought me to yourself, here goes the hypocrites, the disbelievers, and dumb believers who feed into the slander. We're going to come back to that. Now, the phrase in this prophecy, but when thou didst cause me to die, obviously cannot mean death because Allah is not questioning a dead man. In another place in the Holy Quran, it says Jesus appeared as though he had died on the cross. So we're still talking about the appearance. But in the Bible, Jesus states, I came forth from the Father, and I am come into the world. Again, I leave the world and I go to the Father. Now, as we said in the previous message some time back, these words are fulfilled through the Honorable Louis Farrakhan's meeting with the Honorable Elijah Muhammad on the Great Mother Plain on September 17, 1985, where he came forth from the Father, left the Mother Plain and came here into this world with a work and a message to do. Now he leaves this world and returns to the Father again. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad on the Great Mother Plain. But this occurs once again on the heels of persecution by the Synagogue of Satan. Now, both the Bible and the Holy Quran again touch on the controversy as to whether the Messiah is to physically die during his crucifixion. I'm saying is to because it's prophecy. For example, in the Gospel of John, the following is stated regarding the events that Jesus experienced while hanging on the cross. And I want you who read the Bible and preach the Bible to listen. See, you have the words for yourself, but you also have the dogma that you learn in seminary school, which is their interpretation of what these words represent. And actually, you can't even call it that because they're so far off from the words, you don't even know if it's an interpretation or just what they want you to know or speak of while you still have the Bible in your hand. I'm talking about the preachers. Well, it states in the book of John, in the Gospel of John, Jesus is on the cross, and these are some of the events unfolding that he's experiencing. And he, meaning the witness, that saw and bear record, that's the one that's writing the Gospel of John, or at least this part of the narrative. And his record is true. And he knoweth that he saith true, what he saith is true, that ye might believe. For these things were done that the scripture should be fulfilled. The first one, a bone on him, or a bone of him, the Messiah, shall not be broken. In another scripture saith, they shall look on him, the Messiah whom they have pierced. Now give it some context. He's hanging on the cross, and usually they would break the legs of the people hanging there, so if they decided to get down, they wouldn't be able to escape too far. Because crucifixion was known as a slow death. But in this case, they didn't break the legs of Jesus. That's the context. So that scripture says, now the bone of him shall be broken. They didn't break the legs of Jesus on the cross. But it also, again, it says, they shall look on him whom they pierced, meaning you're going to see him again. Now, the last statement refers again to the prophecy of the Messiah's return as the Christ to execute judgment on the world that crucified him. This is his predestined or future work. This is his predestined or future work. Now, to be pierced and to be killed are two different things. Just because somebody stabbed you don't mean you're going to die. Many people survive stabs. Some don't, but most do. If Jesus was killed, then the witness who wrote the account of his crucifixion in the Gospel of John would have just stated this. But he didn't. He didn't say Jesus, they should look upon him whom they have killed. He should know that's impossible. He's dead. But I could look at somebody who comes back that I pierced, who returns. not from death, but from where he was, bearing his wounds where I have pierced him. Now, also, as we explained in the series on the crucifixion of the Messiah, the Honorable Louis Farrakhan, that's the name of the series, we talked about the phrase giving up the ghost, which was the interpretation of that witness. And that still does not mean dying or death. It means relinquishing or completing an assignment or mission. Thus, Jesus states in communicating with the Father in the Gospel of John, I, meaning Jesus, have glorified thee, Father, on the earth. I have finished the work which thou gavest to me. Sound familiar? I finished the 40-year course. Does it sound familiar? Then during his crucifixion, Jesus whimpers on the cross, it is finished. They heard him say that. And we've heard him say that. So again, this indicates the completion of an assignment and not death. Now, in the Gospel of Mark, it states, Joseph of Arimathea, an honorable counselor, which also looked for the kingdom of God, came and went in boldly unto Pilate, the one in charge of Jesus' crucifixion. And he asked for the body of Jesus, and Pilate marveled, meaning he wondered, if he were already dead. He didn't know. So he called unto him the centurion and asked him whether he had been any while dead, meaning Jesus. And when he knew the truth of the centurion, he gave the body to Joseph. Well, when he took the centurion's word. That's what we do. If you give me your word, that's the truth from you. That don't mean that it's true that Jesus is dead. It means that if I ask you a question and you give me an answer, then I'm confident in your answer. That's the truth I got from you. And that's enough for me to give the body over to Joseph. But that don't mean that what you claim is actually true. But this was this centurion's assessment. Well, was it a correct assessment or was it an assumption? Since the centurion did not take the body of Jesus down from the cross. Joseph took it down, the man who asked for the body. So how could you possibly know if he's really dead if you're down there looking up at him and he whispers a few things and drops his head? He could have just been asleep. But you didn't verify if he was dead, and he didn't. And apparently it didn't mean much to Pilate because he didn't know if he was dead or not. He just knew that crucifixion is a long process, but he wanted to know you can't take the body if he's not dead, because we want him on the cross until he dies. Pilate didn't know that. But he said, hold on, wait a minute. Let me ask the security guard. And what he told Pilate was sufficient for Pilate to say, okay. Pilate, excuse me. Now let's consider a few things. If Jesus had died, why would it be necessary for the angels to take his physical body? For you who believe in spook gods. Well, what do we mean? In the Gospel of Matthew, it states, after Jesus' crucifixion, and behold, there was a great earthquake, For the angel of the Lord descended from heaven and came and rolled back the stone from the door where Jesus was and sat upon it. But the angel later on answered, because they came and wanted to find Jesus's body, but it wasn't there. Mary Magdalene and others. So he said to them, fear ye not, for I know that ye seek Jesus, which was crucified, not killed. He is not there, for he is risen. Now, I think most of us rise every day. Not all of us, because some of us die in our sleep, or we take a nap and don't get up out of it. But if you have went to sleep at night and you can rise in the morning, then you have risen. Now, if Jesus is to exist in heaven as a spirit, why would it be necessary to take his body to the one sitting on the throne? He could just fly up there in spirit. Well, according to the book of Revelation, the Messiah shows up in heaven and he's standing before the one on the throne as a lamb, looking as though he had been slain, pierced, meaning he was still bearing the price of his crucifixion, which includes the physical injuries of his body. Now, it also states regarding the Messiah's return as the Christ, his next function, his future work. His next function, his future work. It states in the book of Revelation, behold, the Messiah cometh with clouds, and every eye shall see him, and they also which pierced him, and all kindreds of the earth shall wail because of him. Even so, amen. You're wailing because he's not coming as a friend. He paid the price as a redeemer, but he comes now to execute judgment because you ignored his ministry as the redeemer. But why does the Messiah cometh in clouds? Now we see clouds all the time, and nobody looks up there and see if Jesus is going to be surfing down on one. Well, has your mind ever been cloudy? So clouds here means objects that we cannot comprehend. It refers to the great mother plane and her 1,500 baby planes or bombing planes. Now, I was with the Honorable Louis Farrakhan one day, physically in his presence, along with a dozen others. And he mentioned that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad told him that one day he would see the baby planes coming down in numbers over the major U.S. cities. Some of you may have heard him say that, because he's said it more than once publicly. Well, the Honorable Louis Farrakhan said, after he explained that as he thought about why he was told this by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, it became clear to him that he would bring the baby planes down on the United States. So this is what is meant by the Messiah cometh with clouds. Now, it should be clear that not only is the Messiah present today, the Honorable Louis Farrakhan, but that his return as the Christ is to be expected shortly after his departure to the great mother plane. Now, this too is indicated in the phrase previously cited from Revelation 12 regarding the woman, again, who's styled as the Messiah, where again we repeat, it states, and the woman, meaning Messiah, were given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place, where she is nourished for a time and times and half a time and half a time from the face of the serpent. Now, biblical scholars believe that the phrase time and times and half a time means 42 months or 3.5 years. You can look it up for yourself. Well, if this is true, why do they represent Jesus of 2,000 years ago to be the Messiah that is to return as the Christ? If you know that that phrase represents 42 months, why do you hold on to the one 2,000 years ago coming, hopefully, as the Christ? Is it because they have maintained? Is it because they have to maintain the outdated, ridiculous, and blasphemous company line of the white Jesus in order to continue to reinforce the notion of white supremacy? I'm asking black clergy that question, because you're the ones who's still repeating it. Well, I doubt if most Caucasian clergy will surrender to the truth so easily. That's just not in their nature. So I'm not holding my breath. If I did, I'd be dead. And as what, you got to go without oxygen for 10 minutes or less. But on this point, let me present the following from Brother Jabril Muhammad through an article published in his column, Farrakhan the Traveler, in 1983. Since today's Pope of Rome just recently has been traveling around trying to flex his muscles as the dragon. Well, Brother Jabril states in this article, if you say Minister Farrakhan is crazy, I will ask you this. Do you really believe that the Pope really believes that Jesus is in the skies and has been there for 2,000 years in spirit form to be transformed into visible bodily form, which everyone will see one day, so that he could come to save and to destroy? Have you studied the history of the formation of the church? In other words, Christianity. Is it, as so many Caucasians teach, no more than ancient paganism warmed over? How did it rule and prosper in Europe during what they call the Dark Ages, at the expense of the ignorant white masses? How could the church be in power, be of God and Jesus, rule all but unhindered, and yet that time period is called dark? What about the white church in all its forms in relation to the never-ending wars of Europe and elsewhere, to science, which it has always fought, to worldwide thievery in terms of land and resources of others, which she has been heavily involved in, and to the worst event in all of history, the enslavement of the black man and woman, especially in America? Just what do you think Jesus thinks and feels about all of this? So this prophecy in Revelation 12 refers to the Messiah's return from the great mother plane to execute judgment in his new role or function as the Christ, which means crusher of the wicked. Now we, black people, we can't condemn the obsolete theological positions of Caucasian people while holding on to our own company line, because it seems expedient to do so. So here I want to state 4 points. regarding the fulfillment of Revelation 12 by black people who think progressively. Most of us think like our Caucasian slave masters and believe as they believe. But the ones who think progressively, you have a company line too. So point number one, first, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad departed to the great mother plane to be with Master Fard Muhammad in 1975, according to our teachings from the Honorable Louis Farrakhan in the interpretation of the prophecies. Well, since he did not return in 1978, approximately 3.5 years later, or 42 months, to execute the judgment as the Christ, then we have to reason that our assertion that he is the Christ is nearly correct. In that he, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, reserved that function. Again, had he executed the function of the Christ, we might not be here. But he didn't return in 1978 to do that, according to Revelation 12. Second, Master Fard Muhammad departed from among us in 1934. And since he did not return in 1937 to execute the function of the Christ in judging this world, we have to reason that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's declaration that Master Fard Muhammad was the Christ was nearly correct, in that he reserved that function. But had he executed the function of the Christ, not just a title, the function of the Christ, we might not be here. Third, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad stated that it took him 40 years to understand the last aspects of his mission. That's what he said. He also said to the Honorable Louis Farrakhan, brother, when you discover who you are, you will have to hold yourself down. So when we consider just these statements, there are others, then we can more reasonably accept that both men were nearly correct in their representations of the Christ as it related to the one whom each believed was to execute that function, meaning bringing down Allah's cataclysmic wrath on the world, on this world. So how long do you hold the company line? Well, clearly the Honorable Louis Farrakhan has been physically pierced. And he has spoken candidly about his departure to the great mother plane in his return to exercise his future function. But I know some of you are afraid to say what that function is. I understand it. But I'm not. So the Honorable Louis Farrakhan did not explicitly say what that future function is. But it is clearly whatever it is reserved for him. And that function is the Christ. So defeat my argument or the interpretation of these books. Come against what I just said. You have nothing. You have nothing to say. And most of you won't say I submit, because that's not what you want to hear yourself say. Well, in my function as the harbinger, advocate of the Christ, as I have made that very clear, I'm speaking of his future work. That's what John the Baptist did. And I have explained that his predestined function is that of the Christ. And I've said it just like that. Now, the reality of the Great Mother Plane is absolutely known by governments and high scientists throughout the world. And no one of sane mind who understands or has some knowledge of these superior, supreme aircrafts can doubt the Honorable Louis Farrakhan's connection to the Great Mother Plane. So it all adds up. So, Mr. Preacher, you could say, well, he can't be the Christ. Well, show me the cloud that you can point to where yours might be coming down from. White folks in high places know the reality of that. You may not, because you just ain't catch up yet from playing church. But when you come and catch up to the real seriousness of God's plan, then you have to consider the Great Mother Plane. Maybe Allah will bless you to get there, and maybe he won't. But the truth is sufficient to stand on its own. So the aim of the enemies of the Messiah includes making the people unworthy to receive God's promise. And God's promise is that the chosen people, his people, the black people of the Western Hemisphere, will become the eternal rulers of God's eternal kingdom of peace on earth. So this is why they keep lying and have tricks and just keep us saddled in immorality to rob us of that promise. Now, we do not know how the Honorable Elijah Muhammad will bring the Honorable Louis Farrakhan to himself on the Great Mother Plane for the second time. We have the prophecies of the gospel, or the prophecies in the gospels of the Bible as guides. But Allah keeps his options open. Now, the Holy Quran and Bible describe the crucifixion of the Messiah as a monumental event that extends beyond his person. It reverberates throughout his community, throughout the land where his people are enslaved, and throughout the world. Well, how so? Again, in the Gospels, Jesus describes the events prophesied to take place during the end of the Messiah's presence among us, which is the end of this satanic world, which again didn't take place 2,000 years ago. Now, Jesus states regarding a few of these events, and then shall many be offended and shall betray one another and shall hate one another. Jesus also states in the Gospel of Mark, and Jesus saith unto them, all ye shall be offended because of me this night. For it is written, I will smite the shepherd, and the sheep shall be scattered. Jesus makes this statement to the disciples after they complete what is known as the Last Supper, where he speaks about being betrayed by one of his disciples. Now, what does offend mean? Here, offend is a perception of the one who claims to have been offended. You've offended me. This person feels that they have been grievously wrong, even if the one accused of offending that person is unaware of it. Now, this happens all the time. It may have happened to you. You offended me. What? How did I do that? You didn't know that you did it, because we're dealing with one's perception, which may or may not be the truth or true intention of the one charged with doing the offending. So in this verse or prophecy, Jesus is not saying that he will offend the disciples. He's not saying that. He's not saying that. He's saying the disciples will perceive that he has caused them inordinate grief, maybe arising from their persecution. We can't grieve over persecution. By reason of the circumstances involving how he is smitten by his enemies. So the way his enemies smite him, and the results of that, some of his disciples will perceive it as being offended. He offended me. It's a heck of a thing. Somebody would say that, but you're not talking about the person who smoked me. It's like somebody being punched in the face and you mad at the one got punched in the face, but you don't have nothing to say to the one that punched him in the face. You know why? Because some of you just love white people to death. Whatever they say is the gospel, all their lies and tricks and schemes. So no, you won't go there. That's too big for you. Let me exercise my self-hatred and come down on my brother, the Messiah, who's proven to be the greatest friend that I've ever had. So yes, stiff-hearted people. At least God told the Messiah what he was up against. I'm sending you to a rebellious house. So don't expect anything but trouble trying to bring these people along. And they're stiff-necked and hard-hearted. So you got your work cut out for you. But I want to set expectations right now before I send you there that you're not going to people who are civilized and can think intelligently. Not yet. You have to help them out in that way. So this scattering caused by the Synagogue of Satan's attack on the Messiah will lead many to break ranks with him. And even though, according to the Gospels, all of the disciples previously claimed that they would never do this, Jesus knew they would. He knew they would leave him. He said it. Because of their lack of knowledge and understanding about his relationship with the Father and what the Father required of him. That's the target of how they smite the Messiah. So again, this is prophecy. It is not history. But what has Allah required the Messiah to do? Let's raise that question. For some of you that think you know. What has Allah required the Messiah to do? That because of our lack of understanding of that, we would be offended and turn away from him. As we say when we were young, answer me that question. Allah required the Messiah to do that which makes him the Messiah. And what is that? It is the Messiah's fulfillment of key aspects of the biblical and Quranic narratives of the prophets. So if you don't know this, you don't know him. And if you ain't listening to me, you don't know this. I'll just tell you straight up on that point. Because I'm directly from Allah, from the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And I've made that clear since my inception on this mission. So some of you try to dodge that, like I'm here of my own. But you can't find anything that I have said that I don't connect to my assignment from and guidance by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. So if you get people who are dumb enough to listen to your slander of me, then so be it. Allah makes people. He's making them every day. My task is a clear delivery of the message. He'll decide whom he wants to believe in it or not, meaning Allah. He may not want you to believe in it. We need negative and positive forces to make motion. You might be just a negative force. Now we can connect the prophecy in the Holy Quran regarding the hypocrites among the believers who concocted the lie to the prophecy of the Messiah's statement in the Gospels that many of those who claim to believe in him would be offended by the circumstances involving how he is smitten by his enemies. So if we return to Surah 24 to reiterate this prophecy of how the Messiah is betrayed, Allah states again, surely they who concocted the lie are a party from among you, meaning the believers. For every man of them is what he has earned of sin, and as for him among them who took upon himself the main part thereof, he shall have a grievous punishment. Now, although Islamic scholars believe these verses were revealed to address the circumstances surrounding the slander made against Prophet Muhammad's youngest wife, Aisha, and his faithful servant, there is a major principle in it that can help us today. Principle. Now, all slander is concocted, otherwise it would not be slander. And slander is false spoken statements, usually spoken, that's damaging to a person's reputation. And slander is an abomination in the sight of Allah because he created and established all things on the basis of truth. And also in many cities and governments, if the slander is so damaging, that person who's the victim can file a lawsuit and get some kind of retribution because their reputation has been slandered. So it's a serious offense in God's sight, and it's a serious offense in governments, supposed to be at least. Well, Allah again confirms that a group among those who believe invented this slander. So the slander didn't come from the outside. Now in verse 12, Allah begins to raise questions to the believers as to why they became embroiled in the slander involving the Messiah that extends through his domestic life, involving his wife. That's the background that the Muslim historians or Islamic historians gave about this verse, which is a prophecy. Now, Allah states in this first question, and let's put ourselves in front of Allah and think about all the things that we have done accepting slander without going and finding facts. So let's do an imaginative thing, which is really the reality of our lives. So Allah asked the first question to you and me. Why did not the believing men and the believing women, when you heard it, think well of their own people and say this is an evident falsehood? Well, their own people don't even get the benefit of the doubt. That's what he's saying. Why didn't you give them the benefit of the doubt? That's where you start with. I know them. They're my own people. So it can't be. That's where you start. You don't start with you're guilty as hell. But self-hating Negroes start there. Have you started there? Well, this is a big question. And there's not only one answer. But let's deal with a foremost answer. Because he's talking to those who believe. To acknowledge belief in the truth brought by Allah through his Messiah begins begins the process of reformation from the bonds of mental death and self-hatred, because that's how we come to the Messiah. Mentally dead and haters of self, a rebellious house and stiff-hearted. That's how we come. Some of you may think you come like you all that in a bag of chips. But that's just your own demented thinking. That's not the reality. And if you watch your own actions, you'll know that that's not the reality. So it should not be new information that black people are saddled with self-hatred as a result of living under the wicked authority and schemes of our enslavers and mortal enemies. Now, most of us know this. Black people are saddled with self-hatred. But let's consider what the Honorable Elijah Muhammad says about the consequences of self-hatred. He states, one of the greatest handicaps among the so-called Negroes is that there is no love for self, nor love for his in or her kind, her own kind. This not having love for self is the root cause of hate, dislike, root cause of disunity, disagreement, quarreling, betraying, stool pigeons, and fighting and killing one another. So self-hatred is not a small thing. Otherwise, the Caucasian people charged with enslaving us would not have went to great measures to install this suicidal mentality in black people's minds during their colonization of us, which is still in effect. But unfortunately, we have many fig leaves that we use to justify our expression of self-hatred. Sometimes we use religion, money, or status. Now, in verse 13, Allah goes from questioning the hearts of the believers. Why didn't you think they're your own people? Why didn't you think well of them? Questioning our hearts to now questioning our obedience to his laws regarding the handling of accusations of wrongdoing and sin. So again, he states the second question to the believers. Why did they not bring 4 witnesses of it? He's asking us, why didn't they bring, and you guys, I don't know why they didn't bring 4 witnesses. Well, of course you don't know why they didn't bring 4 witnesses. You didn't require that. But Allah states, okay, as they have not brought witnesses, they are liars in the sight of Allah. And he controls everything. They may be rodeos with you, but in Allah's sight, they're liars. And he is what matters for anybody that's thinking intelligently. So here Allah requires us to bring or present witnesses when we make an accusation against someone, because an accusation must be accompanied by evidence and proof to have any merit. However, again, in this satanic world of the Caucasian people are enslavers, who are our enslavers. Accusations are put forth through the mass news media without proof, evidence, or witnesses. And most people accept these accusations to the extent that those accused of crimes or wicked acts are condemned by the public for things they may not have done or even know anything about. Now, this fact alone, which most people can agree with, the mass media spreading of slander, bears on why the people are prophesied to join the Synagogue of Satan in crucifying the Messiah, the Honorable Louis Farrakhan. Well, according to the Holy Quran, Allah declares those who bring accusations against others to be liars when they fail to present 4 witnesses to support their accusations. Well, what does this mean? It means that even the witnesses brought forth must present evidence and proof to validate his or her witness. You just can't raise your hand. I'm a witness. So you bring just 4 people off the street who don't know any damn thing about it, give them a couple of dollars. That ain't gonna work. This is why in a court of law, the testimonies of witnesses are vetted to determine if their witness is false or true. So witnesses have to be brought forth in an accusation and then vetted, meaning interrogated. We want to know when, why, how, what, all the other questions. If you're a witness, you should know these things. But the Synagogue of Satan counts on people giving energy to the lies it spews through its mass news media. And that energy lends so-called legitimacy in the eyes of the public to the slander made by that person. So if the slander is so thick, those who are responsible are almost forced to go after, like Pilate. He didn't want to crucify Jesus, but the people was yelling so loud. He even says, "What did this man do?" But now he's pressured because the popular opinion of the people was crucify Jesus, even though Pilate, who was the authority of looking at evidence, found no fault with Jesus. But the people did. You did. And when I say you did, I mean that mentality is still present today. But Allah in the Holy Quran is clear about those who ignorantly and deliberately become part of the spread of slander. So for Muslims, if you believe in this book, we have to watch slander very carefully. Because here's what Allah says about our involvement in it. Whoever recommends and helps a good cause becomes a partner therein. And whoever recommends and helps an evil cause shares in its burden. And Allah have power over all things, so you can't run from either consequence. Now, this should make us investigate accusations before accepting them as true. Well, if those who claim to believe in the Messiah, number one, do not think better of their own people, not just him, but your own people, and two, wholeheartedly accept accusations without requiring witnesses or proof, then perhaps they believe that the reputation of the so-called authority of the person bringing the slander is sufficient proof for them to accept the slander, to the extent that they feel they can disobey Allah's requirement for 4 witnesses and solid proof. Yeah, maybe your investment in your buddy's word, or brother so-and-so, or sister so-and-so. Cause you not to consider. Or brother student, this, that, and the other. You think Allah give a damn about them so-called titles? Do we really think that? So some believers took those who concocted and brought the slander against the Messiah as a God besides Allah. Yes, you did. Hypocrites. Now, throughout the Holy Quran, Allah warns the believers against obeying hypocrites and disbelievers. Clearly, all throughout this. Now, why would he tell us not to obey a disbeliever or a hypocrite unless they're going to be around us telling us what to do? Now, I'm not raising suspicion, that you should walk around being suspicious about everybody or everything you hear and see. But we should know these laws and rules. I don't have to be suspicious about anybody. If you bring me an accusation, I want to know if I'm even interested in it. I may not even be interested in that, even if it's true. It don't even have to be gossip. It's just not my concern. I don't need to hear everything about somebody getting shot in Denver and who did it. I'm in Delaware. I'll let the authorities in Denver handle that along with the family or families involved. But if it does concern me and the Messiah does concern me, yes, then you got to sure enough bring some solid proof. No matter who you are. Now, in verse 15, still dealing with the prophecy, which Muslim scholars call Aisha slanderers, those who concocted the lie against the prophet and his family, in this case, the Messiah and his family. It states, Allah says, when you believers received it on your tongues and spoke with your mouths that of which you had no knowledge, you deemed it a trifle, while with Allah it was serious. Serious. All slander is serious. We don't have caste systems. Among the believing community. So what made the believers who circulated the slander think that doing such was inconsequential? Since God said it was trifling in your minds, that means inconsequential. What made them have a trifling attitude about the slander they were spreading? Was it what they thought about the person who was the target of the slander? Like some of you have been? Like I have been? Oh, he's not that important for me to care what they think about. Oh, I'm not that important that you should care about slander against me or anybody. Then what does that make you or me? Was it because the believers in spreading the slander in their vanity had a sense of entitlement to speak about things they had no knowledge of? Now, as for the first question, is this despicable attitude beyond those who believe in Allah? Meaning that if the person you consider to be the little man, I don't have to have 4 witnesses dealing with him because he ain't no damn body anyway. And we could just spread slander about him or her. Well, according to the Holy Quran, Allah condemns that attitude among the believers. He says, "O you who believe, let not some men among you laugh at others. It may be that the latter are better than the former. Nor let some women laugh at others. It may be that the latter are better than the former. Nor defame nor be sarcastic to each other, nor call each other by offensive nicknames. Ill seeming is a name connoting wickedness, to be used of one after he has believed. And those of you who do not desist are indeed doing wrong." So it is this unprincipled mentality, not looking at the principles of righteous conduct, that allows the Synagogue of Satan to find success in sending stool pigeons, hypocrites, and federal agents among the members of progressive organizations. They count on a portion of those in the group of being ignorant of the principles of decency and also lacking the love of self and kind. So they're scanning. Okay, he's a self-hater. Oh, you mean the brother with the bundle of papers? Yes, him. She's a self-hater. Oh, the sister right there with the long dress? Mm-hmm. because I'm listening to their words on the phone. This is the federal agents. You think they care about what we look like with a bow tie? If you're trying to find help, you listening to how people think. Now, as for the second question, that of entitlement. I don't know a damn thing, but I'm entitled to speak on something I don't know anything about. Well, sometimes one's popularity among the people will have the people looking to that person for responses to answers to controversial events or circumstances that he or she knows nothing or little about. I'm popular. I have so many Facebook friends. I have so many YouTube views, and everybody's hearing me. So I got to say something. Oh, do you got to say something even though you don't know nothing? So rather than refrain from responding, that person begins to conjecture about these circumstances. So not only do such persons circulate the prevailing slander, but they produce new slander. So out of your mouths through conjecture comes a whole new type of slander that the devil uses because of someone's vanity to speak on things they absolutely know nothing about. I mean, we live in a time of just great narcissism. Now, I'm just saying, if I had to fight somebody who was older than me and I had time to prepare for it, back in the day, we just go get our bigger brother because he can handle the big dude. So you have people in the streets, big brothers fighting the ones that's big like them because they mess with the little brother. But we don't think like that. Some of us think, I can do it. Well, Allah has something for you. You spread slander about something you don't know about the Messiah. That's just a warning. I'm giving this message to warn you. So you're behind kicking by Allah. If you go that way, it's off my hands. Now, when we consider the prophecy in the book of Revelation where the Messiah, again styled as a woman, is persecuted, this persecution includes slander. Again, how so? Well, the serpent cast water out of his mouth as a flood, meaning that with the intent of producing a flood. He cast water out as a flood. My aim is to produce a flood. So here, water refers to words, written or spoken. Now, as we know, let's think about it, no flood instantly appears, not even a flash flood. A flash flood, by definition, occurs within 6 hours between rainfall and the onset of flooding. So floods are accumulated and often merge or swell with other bodies of water. And they consequently plague low-lying areas with a catastrophic abundance of water. So the flood against the Messiah is against his people. Is meant to entrap his people, who many are also part of the flood. He's already taken off on 2 wings of an eagle. So now the effort is to turn us against him through slander. Now the synagogue of Satan is headquartered by a few wicked families, but they count on the ignorant masses of the low-lying areas of the flood, or where the flood can reach, to gobble down and spread lies and slander that they invent, even if that slander is against their own best interests. Because you think trifling about it. That's what Allah is saying. You don't look serious at what is being said against the Messiah. You spread it because you're just not serious about the consequences of his work on yourself and on your future. Maybe because some of you believe you have a future with white people. But I don't know how you can believe that. Not today. Well, as we approach the Synagogue of Satan's imminent attack on the Honorable Louis Farrakhan's integrity, morality, and work, because that's where the attack is. No matter what it looks like in the mass news media, the attack is on his integrity, morality, and his divine work. What part of this attack are some of those who claim to believe in him going to play in accumulating the flood of slander against him because of their ignorance and or arrogance to speak about that which they know little or nothing about? What part are you going to play in spreading the slander? Trifling attitude, arrogant, self-righteous attitude. Brother or sister believer. Now in verse 16 in Revelation 12, this prophecy of the flood against the Messiah continues. Now it states, "But the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened her mouth and swallowed up the flood, which the dragon had cast out of his mouth." Now I heard people mention that verse. Well, how should this verse be interpreted? Some scholars and clergy presume that the earth represents the people. But given that the people are also involved in producing the flood of slander against the Messiah, this may not necessarily be the right interpretation. Oh, the earth helped swallow up the flood. What does that mean? It's a presumption if you think it means the people are going to help insulate the Messiah from the flood. He's already gone to his Father. Well, what do we know about this verse? We know that when the earth opens up, this phenomenon is called an earthquake. So if the earth opens her mouth, that's an earthquake. Could be. I like to go with that definition, given that the people also spread the flood. So returning to Matthew, Gospel of Matthew 28, it states in verse 2, "And behold," this is after Jesus was crucified, "and behold, there was a great earthquake." It was also an earthquake when he was hanging on the cross. "For the angel of the Lord descended from heaven and came and rolled back the stone from the door and sat upon it." Is this the earth opening up herself to swallow up the flood? Again, this great earthquake happens after the Messiah is crucified and on his way to the Father. Well, Allah uses earthquakes to rid the earth of entire communities and nations whom he has deemed unworthy to continue to live because of their rejection of his divine message and messenger. Thank you for listening. May Allah continue to bless you and your families. Assalamu alaikum.